give us a talk on the marketing of heated tobacco products. Yael, can you share your slides with us? And we are very much looking forward to your talk.
So thank you very much, Daniel. Can you see my slides?
Yes, perfectly.
Okay, so first of all, I just want to thank my collaborators on this project. This is funded by an NIH R01 grant called I2I, Investigating IQOS in Israel and the US. And my collaborators are Professor Carla Berg and Professor Lorraine Abrams from the George Washington University, and Professor Chagai Levine and Amal Khayat, our PhD student from the Hebrew University of Jerusalem. So I'm going to talk mainly about IQOS, which you've already heard a little bit about from the other presenters, which is a heated tobacco product. It is the global leader of heated tobacco products. And at the time of this study, it was the only heated tobacco product sold in Israel. And one of the interesting things about and why we decided to study this was that the IQOS went through a lot of changes in regulation in Israel from when it entered until during the time that we studied it. So it entered the Israeli market in December 2016, and this was one of the first countries. I mean, Japan and Italy and Switzerland were before, but Israel was one of the first countries that IQOS entered the market. And when it entered the market, it was regulated as a consumer product without any restrictions at all. So it could be sold to minors, no restrictions on advertising, nothing at all. And then an NGO that I work with actually petitioned to the Supreme Court, and that forced the Minister of Health to regulate it as a tobacco product. And at that time, this was April 2017, tobacco control legislation in Israel was quite weak. So we had restricted advertisement, mainly in restrictions on television and radio and billboards, and you couldn't use any tobacco products in public spaces, certain public spaces such as restaurants and stuff like that. And there was also a ban on sale of minors, but there wasn't nothing more than that. After another petition to the Supreme Court against the Minister of Finance, we actually managed to get IQOS also taxed at the same rate as cigarettes. And then in March 2019, Israel legislated a very extensive tobacco control legislation that was across all tobacco and nicotine products. So this was for combustible cigarettes, heated tobacco products, and also electronic cigarettes, which included a complete advertisement ban, including online and at the point of sale. However, it excluded print media. So they were allowed to have one advertisement per media outlet per circulation without having any advertisements in youth-oriented media. And in this legislation, but implemented a little bit later in January 2020, was also plain packaging with 65% textual warnings, not graphic, just textual, and a point of sale display ban. So this was again on all tobacco and nicotine products, including heated tobacco products. So as part of this grant, we looked at marketing strategies of IQOS at the point of sale, including a survey with merchants. We also surveillanced all of the advertisements online and print media before and after this different restrictions. We also did a cross-sectional survey with consumers, including an embedded trial within it, looking at different health warnings, and we did qualitative interviews with consumers about these products. However, for this talk, I will focus on the marketing strategies used at the point of sale and in the media. So I'll start with the media, and what we did here was we bought all of the data from IFAT, which is an advertisement monitoring company, and we bought all of the data and advertisement from the moment it entered Israel and until the 4th of August 2020 was when we retrieved the data. So we had data across all of these different regulatory periods that I just talked about. And we asked for data on IQOS, but also on all of Philip Morris cigarettes brands in Israel. So we looked at what the date each advertisement was published to sort of see which regulation period this correlated with. What was the target group that they were advertising to, whether this was the general population, or were they targeting the Arab, the ultra-Orthodox Jewish population, or the Russian population in Israel? It has a very large immigrant from Russian. We looked at the ad spend, how much they spent for each ad. What kind of media channel was this advertised? Was it digital or print? What was the media outlet that it was advertised in? Was this a business-oriented? Was it sports-oriented, general news, stuff like that? What were the dimensions of the ad? Was it a double thread, one page, or less than one page? and at the content itself. And we compared the weekly average number of ads and the weekly average ad spend between IQOS and all of PMI's cigarette brands together. And we also coded all of the visual and text of all the unique ads from the content. So just sort of some very highlights of the results. First of all, during all of this period, they spent a little bit more than $3 million to publish a little bit more than 8,000 IQOS ads. And this was more compared to what they spent to publish all of their cigarette brands together. And if you look at these two graphs, so the top graph is looking at what the IQOS ad spend is by week and regulatory period. And the bottom graph is looking at the cigarette brands from Philip Morris ad spend by the same weeks and regulatory period. So you can see regulatory period 1, when it just entered the market and was regulated as a consumer product. Regulatory period 2, when it's regulated as a tobacco product, but under weak legislation. Regulatory period 3, when there's advertisement and restrictions on advertisement and everywhere except print media. And then regulatory period 4, when there's the plain packaging and point of sale display ban. So just a few highlights. So first of all, when IQOS entered the market, for about 6 months, they did not advertise at all anything for cigarettes. They only advertised IQOS for the first 6 months. Then, once the IQOS was taxed the same as cigarettes, they abruptly stopped advertising at all IQOS because they were we assume they were very disappointed by this because they fought it pretty badly having IQOS taxed as cigarettes. So they stopped advertising it completely and went back to advertising only cigarette brands for that period of time. And then you can also see that after the legislation passed in Parliament that there was going to be an advertisement ban, between the legislation and when it was implemented, there's a high spike of, they spent a lot of money on advertising, again, both IQOS and cigarettes. And you can see that for both products, of course, once the advertisement ban went into effect, the ad spend went completely down because they were only allowed to advertise in print media and very sporadically. What we also saw that almost all of the advertisements were directed at the general population, and there was very few targeting of subpopulations. However, the targeting of subpopulations started in regulatory period 2, and from all of the advertisements that were targeted at subpopulations, almost all of them were targeted for ultra-Orthodox Jewish population. And this is interesting because the ultra-Orthodox Jewish population in Israel have the lowest smoking rates. And actually the Arab male have the highest smoking rates. And we didn't see any targeting at all of Arab male in their advertisement. We saw mainly targeting of ultra-Orthodox Jewish. One potential explanation that we think this might have something to do with was that the Minister of Health at that time was from the ultra-Orthodox Jewish party, and he had connections to some media outlets. So this might have been an explanation on why they targeted the ultra-Orthodox Jewish media. We also saw that as restrictions went to be more extensive, they changed what they were doing. So in period 4, which was the most restricted restrictions, they increased double spread IQOS ads. So they were using that, they were only allowed one ad, but they used it to have a double spread IQOS ads to increase their advertisement. We also saw an increase in IQOS ads that were showing indoor setting. So even though IQOS was not allowed to be used the same as cigarettes in any public indoor places, a lot of their advertisements showed the IQOS being used in indoor settings. And we also saw as regulation increased, an increase in additional details cues, so either the link to a website or QR codes that you can go to get additional information, and also information about retail accessibility, so actual addresses of point of sale where you can get the IQOS device or the heat sticks. When we compared the IQOS ads to cigarette ads, we saw that the cigarette ads mainly featured quality of the cigarettes, whereas IQOS ads mainly talked about it being innovative. Both of them, about a quarter of the ads were sort of themed about freedom and choice. However, most of the IQOS ads also had comparative claims, so comparing them mainly to cigarettes and talking about it being no combustion, no smoke, no ash, an alternative to smoking, or as satisfying as smoking. And this is just an example of some of the ads that we saw. You can see the ad showing closer and having the IQOS, both the device and the heat stick, and it's the green light showing that it's being used in an indoor setting. So this is actually, in some ways, trying to get people to sort of understand that you can use this instead of cigarettes when you want to be close to people, and it says without ashes and less smell. And now going to the point of sale. So here what we did, we actually did 2 rounds of point of sale audit. So the first round was right before the point of sale display ban, but already when there was an advertisement ban in the point of sale. And we looked at 80 IQOS point of sale in 4 of the largest cities in Israel. So we took out all of the point of sale from the IQOS website, and we randomly chose 80, 20 for each of the large cities. And then we went back about 6 months later, after the point of sale display ban was implemented in the plain packaging, we went back to the same point of sale and audited them again. We managed to audit 60 of the original 80, and we replaced additional 27. And we used the adapted version of the standardized tobacco assessment for retail settings. We adapted it to heated tobacco products as well. We piloted it before and published that pilot study as well. We also did a 1.5 years later a cross-sectional survey with merchants working in IQOS point of sale, and we used a phone and an online link, and we had 43 merchants that completed the survey. So in the first round of point of sale audits, and I'm just going to highlight some of the things, what we saw that only one of them actually sold the IQOS device. So they all sold heat sticks because they were selling IQOS, but most of them, almost only one of them was selling the IQOS device. It was very uncommon to see any advertisement or any price promotions for IQOS or for heated tobacco products in general. But we did see special display cases, and I'll show you an example of this. And we also saw that it seemed that they were sort of targeting the more higher socioeconomic. So only one of these point of sale was in a low socioeconomic neighborhood, and on average, heats were being sold at 27% more expensive compared to cigarettes. So you can see here examples of the special display. First of all, it's not in the regular cigarette display. It's sort of separate than that. It's a very simple cardboard box that just had the heat packages inside it. You can also see that this is already complying with the display ban. It has sort of like this white sticker covering the IQOS name. But the advertisements that were found in these point of sale were not about heated tobacco products. They were very general for tobacco products or specifically for cigarettes. In the second round of the point of sale, so this was about 6 months after the point of sale display ban went into place in plain packaging, we saw a very significant increase in the number of point of sale that were already selling the IQOS device. So up to this point, the IQOS device was mainly sold online, but now we're seeing a lot more of selling the IQOS device itself. We also saw a lot of advertisements, and I'll show you them in a bit, but they were compliant with legislation. So they weren't saying IQOS, they weren't saying heats, but they were saying heated tobacco product. And just remember that this was the only heated tobacco product on the market at that time. We also saw an increase in the special heats display case, and I'll show you pictures of that as well because it became a lot more sophisticated. So here you can see examples of these signs. So there were multiple signs like this. There could be up to 3 different signs in the same point of sale, saying here you can get heated tobacco or saying alternative to smoking cigarettes. But notice that they have the same colors used in all of these signs. And these colors actually represent the different flavors that were on the market at that time for IQOS. So this is a sort of very sophisticated way of circumventing the legislation. So they're not using the brand name, but it's obviously using branding to sort of market specifically IQOS and heats. And this is the display case. So this is a very sophisticated display case. First of all, notice that it's on the counter, which means that it's more likely to be in children's point of view and next to candy. And you can see that when the light is off, you can't see anything. But when this merchant flickers something on the behind, it becomes transparent and you can actually see the device or the heats that are inside it. So it's a sort of way if an inspector comes in, it can be compliant with the legislation, with the display ban. But if they wanted at the other times to not be compliant, very easy to do that. Also notice the QR code, and actually anybody buying the IQOS device and heat was asked to actually scan the QR code and provide details, their ID number and phone number and email. And that was a way for them to continue advertising directly, because direct advertisement to people was allowed under the legislation if they gave consent to that. So in summary, we saw very prominent marketing of IQOS after a few months, but it was compliant with the legislation. We saw an increase in special display, increase in the number selling the IQOS device, but we also saw a lot of circumvention of the legislation using multiple different signs branded with colors and using very prominent displays with QR codes, basically using multiple purchase cues to get people to be aware of this and buy this product. And just for the result of the survey with the merchants, so as I said before, we had 43 merchants that answered this. Again, most of them were from medium and high socioeconomic neighborhoods. About a quarter of them were current or ex users of IQOS, and about a little more than 50% were current or ex-smokers. And what we saw that most of them said that they received the special display and that they had contact with a specific IQOS or HEAT salesperson that was different to Philip Morris cigarette brand salesperson. So even though they sold cigarettes from Philip Morris, they had a separate salesperson coming to talk to them and giving them the IQOS and the HEATs. And they received...
Just that you know that you've spoken for 50 minutes now. So
all right, I'm finishing in 1 minute.
Time.
Okay, so they had financial incentives based on sales, invitation to parties, price discounts for personal use or for promotion. They also had price discounts to customers and price promotion to customers. And we also saw that these strategies increased after the point of sale display ban. They also talked about having interactions with the sales person and basically providing them with free display cases and providing information on the legislation and how to circumvent this legislation. So in conclusion, we saw specific marketing strategies to promote IQOS and specifically to differentiate IQOS from combustible tobacco markets. All of this increased after the new legislation, circumventing the point of sale display ban through special displays, flags, and signs. And we also saw targeting mostly of point of sale that were carrying the IQOS device. They received more instructions and promotions. Basically, retailers are sort of becoming the representative in order to sort of have their company's messages forwarded to the public. And I just want to finish with dedicating this talk to Shlomi Matias, who's a childhood friend of mine, and his wife, Shachar Matias, who were murdered exactly a year ago by Hamas terrorists. Today is October 7th. So this talk is in memory of their loss. Thank you very much. And if you're interested in any of those, they were all published, and I'm happy to send you the manuscripts themselves.
Thank you very much, Yael. Very interesting. Also, how innovative the industry is to circumvent legislation, and it seems to be the same everywhere around the world. Anyone in the audience, please go ahead and ask questions if you have. In the meantime, can you give us a very brief context about smoking in Israel? So what's the tobacco control context, let's say, in which these products are sold?
Yeah, so smoking rates in Israel for combustible cigarettes are around 20%, and it's been pretty much that same way for the last decade. We haven't been able to get below that. And there's stark differences between the different subpopulations. So Arab male have the highest smoking rate at around 40%, then Jewish male at around 25%, then Jewish females at around 16%, and Arab women have the lowest smoking rate at around 10%. E-cigarette use is quite low among adults, but very high among youth. So up to the introduction of e-cigarettes, we were having lowering use of tobacco by youth, but this has been completely overturned, and now we have about a quarter of youth talking about experimenting and using e-cigarettes. Heated tobacco products, so there's a lot of experimentation, but actual daily use is quite low, with less than 3% of the population.
Right, thank you. The question by Karin Fitztum: how much do retailers earn from selling IQOS compared to regular cigarettes?
Wow, that's a great question, and I don't know. So we know that in some ways we compared the price of HEATs to sort of the most expensive Philip Morris brand to the least expensive Philip Morris brand, and it was somewhat in the middle. So it was more expensive than the average Philip Morris brand, but it was still less expensive than some of the most expensive ones. But I don't know how much they earned on each one of them, because that's a different question, how much they were getting, how much the company was selling it to them.
With what you showed us about the smoking rates that differ between Arabs and the general population, would you say that the strategy of Philip Morris was to target these heated tobacco products particularly to non-smokers?
Well, that's one of the things that we're speculating, because actually my PhD student, Amal Khayat, her PhD was focused on looking at comparing IQOS marketing, comparing it between the Jewish and the Arab population. And we were expecting to see that they would be targeting the Arab population since they have the highest smoking rates. And we didn't find that. And we actually found that they were targeting the ultra-Orthodox. And this was found across different studies that we did. So I don't know if this was because they were targeting non-smokers, but we do have also other evidence from looking at the content also from the US showing that they were targeting, that some of the advertisements were targeting women and some of it were targeting young people, youth. So we definitely saw some examples of those, but they're very, very careful in their marketing. So nothing is clear cut. It's all very gray in some ways.
Related to that gray area, maybe one last question. I'm not sure about the methods of where you got the data from for the advertising research, but did you look at social media as well and how, let's say, so-called influencers show these products and so on, as compared to regular advertisements, official advertisements, and so on?
Yeah, unfortunately, we didn't, because the company that does the monitoring doesn't have a good capacity to do social media monitoring, which made it very, very messy. We did look at Philip Morris social media accounts and what they were advertising on their social media accounts across countries, and we've published that, but not on social media using influencers. But there are people that have done some research on that, showing that they do target youth using influencers and stuff like that.
Right. Thank you very much, Yael, for a very inspiring talk. And